good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to everybody joining us today, depending on where you're coming from. We're so excited to have you for our first webinar of the year. We're going to give people just a minute to keep joining, but we will get started in a minute. So while you're waiting, go ahead and throw in the chat where you're joining us from, or in the Q&A box, and then you can also hop in, and if you want to connect with your fellow attendees on LinkedIn, we have a box for that as well, so you can throw your links in there and you are able to connect with them. So again, we'll get started in a couple minutes, and we are excited to have you today for our webinar all about the Comparative Agility tool. All right, I'm seeing we're having people a lot from the US. We've got United Arab Emirates. That's so exciting. Austria, Boulder, Colorado, which is very close to me as well. We've got Amsterdam. Really got a global audience this morning, or morning for me, afternoon, evening for you, depending on where you're at. So let's go ahead and jump in and get started. Good morning. My name is Molly Lord, and I am a member of staff here at Scrum Alliance, and I am so excited to welcome you to our webinar on building a culture of data-driven continuous improvement, which is going to be a deep dive and demonstration of our amazing member benefit, the Comparative Agility tool. So a little bit about Scrum Alliance, in case you weren't aware. We were established in 2001 as a 501c6 nonprofit and membership organization geared towards supporting and expanding the Agile and Scrum community throughout the world. To date, we have awarded over 1,876,000 certifications. And our mission is to advance real-world agility by equipping and inspiring the changemaker in everyone, which is a huge part of why we have these webinars and why you're here today. So again, thank you for joining us. And as Scrum Alliance members, you may know this and you may not, but you have access to some incredible member benefits. So one of them is access to the Scrum Alliance Learning Journey courses. So these are specially curated and created courses to help you keep learning after you finish your certification. So to take what you learned, give it more nuance, give it more real-life application, just to really help you no matter where you're at in the Agile journey. You also have access to our amazing global community. We are in almost every country. I think at this point we have certification holders. And so you are able to connect with them in a variety of different ways, whether it be our webinars, our events, our articles, different ways. You also get discounts to our regional Scrum gatherings and our global Scrum gatherings to help you on your Agile journey. You also have access to the Retrium retrospective through your Scrum Alliance dashboard. And the reason we are all here today, you have access to our comparative agility tools, including comparative agility. For our Scrum Masters, you have access to the Scrum Master Personal Improvement Tool, and for our product owners, the Product Owner Personal Improvement Tool. So without much further ado, if you want to kind of follow along, go through the benefit today along with our amazing speaker, if you go to scrumalliance.org and log into your dashboard, you'll go up to the top where it says, hello, your name. And when that menu comes down, you'll go to your dashboard. And then on the side menu, it'll be about halfway down, the tab that says benefits. You'll go there and you'll be able to access the Comparative Agility Assessment tool. So today we are joined by Jorgen Hesselberg, who is the co-founder of Comparative Agility. And I'll let you take it away, Jorgen.
Thank you so much, Molly. Thank you for those kind words. And I am super excited to be here today. This is something that's really near and dear to my heart. I am a proud certificate from Scrum Alliance. I have a Scrum Master as a CSM, and I also have a Product Owner as CSPO certification. So very proud of that. So this is one of those things that I think is so wonderful that Scrum Alliance does, not just to provide a community with lots of resources, but also tools that can help you be more effective when it comes to building and sustaining more agile organizations. The thing that's kind of interesting today, I think, is that there has never been a time where it needs to have agility as part of how we work. We see organizations struggle. We see that changes are happening so quickly. Agility is more important now than ever. But at the same time, you can also see that our industry is struggling a little bit. You can hear articles about agile being dead, and you can hear people having challenges with layoffs and things like that. And that's challenging. I think part of what we need to do as an agile community is to up our game. What we need to do is use all that knowledge that we've gained through our certifications and through our resources, but also leverage tools and data to inform how we do our work. So I think that's why this is so important. Agile is more important now than ever. It's under pressure. And I think if we use tools and resources and the community, we can be more effective and show how we can help organizations be more agile and more successful in this crazy world we live in right now. Now, that being said, what I'm going to try to do today is to be very interactive. I'm not going to have a lot of slides. This is going to be all about showing you the tool, making sure it's hands-on, interactive, and maybe a little bit of fun as well. We'll see. This is going to be live, so maybe some things will go wrong. That's all part of the charm. But we're going to try to make this kind of fun. My goal is that by the end of this session, so in about 55 minutes from now, you should be productive and ready to go right away and use this tool. So that's my goal, and then we'll see if we make it. So please rate the session as much as you can. I know there's going to be some surveys. Let us know if you like it. And then if you do, maybe we'll do another session or so in a couple of months. That's the goal of all of this. So why don't I start with what I see some people are asking already. How do you access these tools? I'm going to start now and share my screen, and hopefully you can see that. So everyone can see the screen here. Nice and loud. There we go. You can see it. And what I will do now is show you how you can access these tools. Because, one thing is to put up a slide. That's interesting in itself. But I think sometimes that can be maybe a little bit confusing. You want to see it step by step. So I'm going to show you that. So why don't we go to Scrum.org, scrumalliance.org. This is the site that we're all looking at. This, by the way, is a brand new site. They've done a redesign of the site. Doesn't it look pretty? Lots of nice elements to this site, which is really cool. So go in there right now. And what I've done, I've logged in. And what I do is I go to my dashboard. And once you go on your dashboard, what will happen is that you will see your profile on Scrum Alliance. And here you can see me. I have had, as you can see, a couple of certifications. You see when they expire and all those kind of things. But I think the most important here for this purpose is to look at your benefits. Because when you look at your benefits, you will then see elements that are available to you as a certificate with Scrum Alliance. And right now, there are three things we're going to focus on. There's the Scrum Master Personal Improvement Tool, and then there's the Product Owner Personal Improvement Tool, and then the Comparative Agility Assessment Tool. Those are the three things we're going to talk about today. We're going to focus on Comparative Agility today, since it's a relatively large platform. And then later on, we'll touch on the personal improvement tools as well. But that's something we also will spend more time on next time. Now, note, if you don't see some of these and you say, well, why can't I see the Product Owner Personal Improvement Tool? It's probably because you don't have a CSPO certification. It's an exclusive offering just for people who have that certification. So that's kind of nice. So let's get started, and let's pretend that you have clicked on this button here and actually activated your benefit. Let's talk about the tool and how it works, and ultimately how you can build a culture of data-driven continuous improvement, because that's what this webinar is all about. So let me just give you a little bit about what Comparative Agility is about. What is this tool? Well, we like to call it the Spotify of continuous improvement. It's sort of a platform, just like Spotify is, but the difference is, instead of having a lot of really great music, we have lots of really great surveys and assessments. So instead of Taylor Swift, you will have Mike Cohn, for instance. And instead of Katy Perry, you might have, people like, say, Amy Edmondson. If you look at the types of things that are available to you on Comparative Agility, you'll see a number of different assessments. And it is covering everything that you can imagine when it comes to continuous improvement. And this is all available to you as part of this benefit. So if you look at this here, what you can see that there's lots of different elements to this. You have the agile leadership mindset, you have Bossa Nova, you have comparative agile, psychological safety, all sorts of different assessments that are all available to you. Now I'm seeing here some people saying they can't see my screen. Molly, are you seeing some of this too? Or is this specific to certain users?
I think this may be specific to certain users, but let me do some troubleshooting in the back end to see if I can figure out what's going on. We
All good.
appreciate all of your patience, guys. This is a new platform for us. And so right now, I am not seeing any reason that people should not be seeing your screen. I am in the attendee view.
All good. Just wanted to check just in case, because we certainly want people to see. No, so that's one of the things that makes this platform a little different. You have these validated surveys. So that's our data statisticians who are looked into making sure the surveys are valid. And then there are domain experts that actually create the surveys. So that's different from what you see from most others, but that's how this particular platform works. We don't have any certifications. We don't have any paid training. We don't have any of that. There's lots of free training that you'll get and things like that. But of course, the certifications, you go to Scrum Alliance for those. This is what you use as a tool to be effective in your work. So enough of that. Let's actually show you how this works and kind of go through this step by step. So I'm going to log into the platform itself and show you how this tool works. And essentially what you will see is that there are essentially three things you're going to do. One thing is to collect data. The other thing is to analyze the data based on the data you have collected. And then you present the data by creating reports and then take action. Those are the three things you do. So it's relatively simple, but there's lots of power that comes with that. And that's something I'm going to explain to you a little bit in some detail. So what we have here is the structure screen. You look at the link here to the left, you see the structure screen. What I've created here is a pretty basic setup. You can see this anywhere. You know, people will be set up in any way they want. The important thing here is that you will set yourself up in a way that makes sense to your organization. It could be a value stream setup. It could be a product line. It could be maybe a vertical setup, maybe location-based. Whatever it is, try to mimic the setup that makes sense for your organization. It makes it easier to manage your data that way, and it also will make more sense to your users when you later on look at the analysis that you can do. Now, how do you set this up? Quite simple. You will look here to the upper right-hand corner. You see Create Team. You can create folder as well. So I'm just going to create something very simple just to show you how you can do this. If I create a folder here, you can click on this button. Here's a folder. Let me just call it Scrum Alliance. So now we have a folder called Scrum Alliance. Underneath that, I can then create any type of child folder, maybe for instance, a program. I'm going to do that now, program. And then underneath that, if I want to, I can start to create teams. So here's a child team, for instance, Team A. So you see, just like that, I was able to create a structure, and I can do this however I want, and as many as I want. You have, with your certificates and with the benefits that you get from Scrum Alliance, you get for free 5 teams, and that is a value of $2,500. So that's quite useful, and you can take that to your clients when you help them be better when it comes to this. Now, when you create this structure, what you can do once the structure is created is to start to collect some data. And this is when it kind of gets fun, because the data here is important, but it's probably more important than anything else is the conversations you have with the data. That's what this comes down to at the end. It's not so much about the answers. It's about the conversations and the questions we ask when we do this. So let me try this live and look at different things that we can do to collect this data. So here's Team A, for instance. If I want to collect some data, I can click on Add Capability, and then I can choose what type of survey I want to send out. So let's see here. Lots of really cool surveys here. Let me see. Why don't I just run an agile survey, maybe, or let's see, something kind of interesting. How about a culture code? This is a agile culture. We know that's important. I'm going to send that out. When we do that, we have some options. We can send out that survey asynchronously, which means that we will send that survey out to all the people in our teams. And I'll show you how you add people to your teams. Or if we want to, we can create a facilitated session right away. That's a great way to create an engaging way of collecting data in real time. So let's try that and see how this works. I'm going to create what we call facilitator mode. When we do that, you will see facilitator mode created. And once you do that, I can then select which questions I want to use to send this out and make sure that we can actually have an engaging session. So I'm going to choose some questions here. We're not going to go through all of them in this demo, but we're going to try a couple just to show you how it works. I can choose which of these questions I want to show and which I don't. But let me just do a couple. Let's try this in real time and see how it works. Now, this is where it gets interesting. Let's see how this happens now in real time. So what just happens now is that you will see a QR code. What I encourage you to do is to take your phone and scan in that QR code. If you do that, what should happen is that you will see a link. And when you click on that link, you will be able to see that there is a session that's about to start. Now, I'm the presenter in this case, so I'm mimicking you if you have this account. And what will happen is that you now can have an engaging session with your team, talking about some really important things and have an engaging, interactive session with them. So let's see what happens now. I'm just going to look for some people here. I can see here active participants. We have 18. Some people are signing up. This is great. By the way, this is completely anonymous. It is also confidential, so there's no way for me to know who's signing up here. This is a great benefit to this kind of surveys because now you can get an idea what people feel about these really important topics without calling people out. Now, here's one thing I want you to be aware of. I can choose to click hide instant results. Now, why is that important? Now, when we do a survey like this, if I hide the results, that means that I won't show the results up front. I can hide them until after we've talked this through. If I don't click this particular check mark, I will show the results in real time. That can be kind of cool, but it also might create what we call anchoring. And anchoring means that people might just kind of click and choose what other people are choosing because it kind of feels right. You don't want to stand out. But we really want to feel and understand how people feel about these things. We want to know that. So I'm going to click hide instant results, and then let's get started and see what happens. So we start the survey. Now, the first thing that's going to happen when we start the survey is that we will see that it will ultimately go to the next level. Now, we have 101 people accessing this at the same time. So it looks like we're having some challenges handling 108 people at the same time. So I might have to make this smaller. This happens at the team level. So we might not be able to handle as many as 100 people at the same time. So let me refresh this. I told you it was live, right? So let's refresh this. And I'm going to start this a little earlier because I'm not going to be able to handle 100 people at the same time. So let me go back here to the structure and start the survey. But you understand what I'm saying? The important thing here is that we don't want to show the results up front because that's going to create some challenges when people might actually choose what other people are choosing just because they're worried about choosing something else. So let's get on here, log in here, and I'm going to choose this again and not have as many as 100 people join at the same time. So let's see if we can do that. What will happen now as we log in, we will then start to see, and I think what's happening here is that we have so many people logging in, so it's probably overwhelming the system. So what I might do instead is actually show you what will happen to the reports that we will show. So what you can do, if you send out the surveys asynchronously, what will happen then is that instead of seeing the results in real time, you will see the results of the survey in an asynchronous manner. So that matters is that if you send out the survey that way, when you send out that survey, what happens then is you can run the analysis, but it's not something you will show in real time. So in this case, you sent out the survey, you collected it through email, and then you see what's happening, and you can see now that, okay, we're now starting to see some results, but it was happening not in real time, but that's okay, because now we can present the results to the people later on. Now, what are we seeing here? We're seeing a trend analysis. A trend analysis is quite interesting because that's showing us how we're doing over time. And when you're doing an agile transformation, nothing is perfect at once. We know that. We have to inspect and adapt. You have to do things little bit by little bit and learn along the way. In this case, we sent out a survey to an entire division. So there's lots of teams involved here. And what we were able to do is look at all these teams, send out the survey, get the feedback from them. And then what we were able to do is look at how they're doing over time. And here you can break it down by the dimension of the different results. Here you can see requirements, you can see planning, And you can also look at just all of it at once like this if you want to. And now you're seeing all of the different dimensions displayed. Now, what you can do is you can roll this up into a total average. If you do that, you'll have one single line that shows the entire average for all of the dimensions inside of that particular survey. And then if you overlay the world index, now what you can see, you can start to see where you are compared to the rest of the world. Now that can be a really interesting conversation you can have with management when you show this type of results. And you can say, hey, here's where we started. This is where you gave me the Scrum Master certification. I just got it started. We started to coach some teams. We weren't doing okay, but compared to the rest of the world, we really weren't doing that great. But then as we started to make changes, as we started to listen to the data, we could start to see that we're making changes and we're making improvements. And you can see here over time that things are actually moving in the right direction. You can see here compared to the world index, we're actually doing quite a bit better. So this is actually quite awesome. You can now start to see that, okay, this is great. We're now doing better than the world index, positive stuff. Now, at the same time, it doesn't mean that we're done. If you look at this now and we take away the total average, you can now break it down by dimension and start to see that, okay, when it comes to knowledge creating, teamwork, when it comes to planning, we're doing pretty good. But if you look at technical practices, well, we're actually not doing so hot there. We're actually not doing as well as the world index. So there's probably some more work to be done there. You see what I'm saying here? This is about telling a story. Management, they want to be more agile, but at the same time, they want to understand what's happening. And if we're making some progress over time, this is one way to illustrate that. You can also go down here and look at the different elements here. You can look at teamwork and look at how you scored over time. Here's you looking at the last 6 data points. So there's lots of different ways to break that down and be a little bit more detailed. So that's going to be quite useful. So let's see here. One thing I wanted to show you, if I go here to the Division A filter here and see what we can do here, I'm going to try this here again. And now I'm going to not try to do this with 100 people. But I want to show you how this works. So now it's going to be the first person who responds will have a chance to do this. So let's see how many we get before we get started. So I'll try this and see if we can find a couple of people that are responding or not. And then we will see if we can show that. I'm going to go and log into this myself and just kind of look at that myself, and I can start to see it happening. Yeah. So now we're seeing some people join in. Now, when you start that survey, now you can start to see that, with less than 100 people at once, it's a little easier. We can now talk about this particular topic. Our managers know the strengths of their team members, and empower them. This is a really good question. Our managers know the strengths of their team members, and they empower them. This is one of those things we want our agile leaders to do. Let's see how people felt when they answer that question. So I encourage you now, for those of you who were able to log in, just go in there and see what you feel in terms of getting in there quickly. And then see what we have here. I was able to get in, and then we see how many of these people are actually getting it. So I was able to get a very quick result from one of them. And you see a couple of more coming in here. And you can see that what's happening here is that it's pretty clear what some of the people are saying. They're actually saying, I'm going to try to go a couple of steps ahead here to our next question and see what we can see here. Some of them are saying not applicable. Others are saying, no, this is not offending to me at all. And then we'll see what's happening, because now I just rolled it out a couple of more questions. Start to what you're seeing here, I can say, okay, this is fine. Not a lot of results that I can use. If I go back, I'm going to just go for the ones that actually make sense to me in my team when I have this conversation. So this is where I can see how that works and try to make sense of it and make sure that I can actually do this in a way that makes sense to the teams. Because ultimately, you want to have a conversation, and this brings up that conversation much quicker. So that's one of the things that I think could be useful to do. The type of questions you use will depend on what is important to you. And sometimes that's going to be, a marketing survey or something like that. And other times it's going to be something completely different. Now, we did this now in an asynchronous way. So we're not going to do this in real time. And what you can see then is that you can go and start to look at the analysis. And I think one of the things that I think is really cool is that the type of analysis you can do is only dependent on how much data you select. So when you have a lot of data, you can compare that to all sorts of different types of scenarios. So if you look at this screen here, what you will see is that on the left-hand side, you have the data that you want to compare. And then on the right-hand side, you have the data you want to compare it with. So those are the two elements you have. Here's the data that we collected. Here's the organization. You see a portfolio. You see a product line, a division. And underneath that, you see different locations, Berlin, and in this case, Chicago. So you can tell that I'm a 80s kid, based on these names. But what you see here, you see a division and a location and different teams. You can now take any of these elements, whether it's just one team or an entire location, and compare that to anything you want on the right-hand side. And here on the right-hand side, you can compare it to no benchmark at all, if you want to do that. You can compare it to the World Index, which is the world's largest agility index, or an industry-specific benchmark. And this one can be really great, because one thing I think it's missed sometimes about agile ways of working is that it's not the same everywhere. I mean, if you're working in an industry that's, say, banking or perhaps in healthcare, you have a lot of regulations, you have a lot of constraints, a lot of ways to make it harder for you to actually do your work very agile, to be honest. Now, if you're a cloud company or a technology company that doesn't have those constraints, your level of agility might be different. So I think very often comparing yourself to other people in our organizations in your industry can be quite useful. You can also choose no benchmark at all. The trend report is the one we just looked at, so you saw how that looks. And then, of course, you can compare yourself to the last period or other parts of your own organization. Now, I would never say compare yourself to, for instance, like one team against one team. That's not something we want to do here. What we might want to do, though, is look at, for instance, Berlin against Chicago, for instance. If you want to see differences between how teams in those locations perceive how they're working, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. You can also compare, for instance, one team against all the other teams in the same location. I think that's also fair. Don't want to do one team against one team. I think that can kind of create some weird conversations that we don't want to have. I think the important thing here is to look at insights and actionable data, not to compare teams in that sense, but to compare one team against all the other teams in the same program. That can be quite useful because it can really elicit some great conversations. So what I'm going to do here is do a kind of classic report. I'm going to look at all the teams in Division A, because we looked at that earlier. And what we did is we did an industry a trend, and we were able to see how that looks. And now I'll compare that against the World Index. So it'll be like this, Division A versus World Index. So when I run this particular report, what will happen then is that we will crunch all that data for all of those teams and look at how they're doing, and then see what type of insights we can get when we look at all the data from Division A and compare that to the World Index overall. When you look at this in the beginning, you might say, okay, what's happening here? Let me explain what you're seeing and how you can make this actionable. First of all, Division A is what we chose on the left-hand side. That's all those teams that we looked at. Here's all those teams. We looked at that earlier when we looked at the trends. You remember that? And here's all the teams all aggregated. And then on the right-hand side, we chose the World Index. Now, the World Index is normalized to 0 in this case. So that means that this big 0 you see here, that is the World Index. That tells us that every time Division A is saying they're doing better than the world, is going to be above the line, positive, or blue. And every time Division A is indicating they're doing worse than the world, in this case, it's going to be below the line, negative or orange. So right here, you can see that, for instance, in requirements, you see some challenges, in quality and technical practices, but in outcomes, it looks pretty good. And in culture, it looks really great. This actually makes sense because remember that trend analysis we did earlier? You saw that we were doing quite well there overall, weren't we? What you can also do is you can look at the average scores. If you don't want to compare yourself to anything and just look at the average scores, you can start to see the average here broken down by dimension. You see teamwork, requirements, and again, you see technical practices, maybe challenged a little more than the others. That's okay. We'll dig into that a little bit later. You can also look at something called distributional characteristics. And this, I think, is super important. What this is doing is showing you the standard deviation of the data. And what does that mean? Well, standard deviation is a statistical measure that essentially shows you the central tendency in the data that you're displaying. So if you look at this here, I'm going to dig down a little bit now and look at these particular box plots, as they're called. If you hone in on any of these box plots, especially those box plots that are relatively large from a vertical perspective, what that's showing you is that the level of agreement is quite low if you have a large box plot. So look at this question here, for instance. Test-driven development. Here's the question. Most code is written using TDD. Kind of a simple question if you think about it. But as you see, this is a relatively large vertical bar, and that tells you that within all the teams that are responding to that particular question, they're not agreeing with each other. Some people are saying, yeah, we're definitely doing that. Others are saying, no, not at all. So this is trying to tell you that there is a lot of disconnects with your teams with that particular question. Now, what you can do now, of course, is look at this and say, all right, we see that there's disagreement. Now, here's the average scores. Well, the average is 2.36. And then what you can further do is look at how you're doing compared to the world. And you can see that that's also underperforming. So you see what's starting to happen here. We're telling a story with our data. We're underperforming compared to the world. Our average score is low. We have a lot of disconnects inside our teams. You know what? This might be worth a conversation. That's essentially what we're getting out of this. We're starting to see where we might need to focus our efforts. So this is good stuff. There's a couple of other ways that you can do here to visualize your information. Look at this one here, for instance. This is a really great way to show the average scores, but also look at how you're doing from a world index perspective. Here you see everything broken down by dimension. So here you have teamwork, requirements, planning. If I just want to look at technical practices, for instance, here I can see how we're doing, and here is the world index. I can lay that over it and quickly see how we're doing compared to the rest of the world, and start to see here that when it comes to this particular element here, most code is written using TDD. That's the one we saw earlier. We can actually see that we're underperforming the world in this particular case. All of this is telling us there is something going on here. Not everybody's working the same way. Some have more challenges than others. Okay, that's fine. We're coaches, right? This is where we can help. And this is where it helps that you have a Scrum Master certification or a Product Owner certification. You know what this means. You know the kind of actions you need to take. The question, though, is to find out which teams need your help. Now, there is a way to do that, too, and that is to run the impact matrix. If you run the impact matrix, what will happen is that all the teams that were part of our analysis will be mapped out on a matrix that looks at two essential quadrants, or I can call them dimensions. Performance on the x-axis, that's essentially looking at the level of agreement or a level of the scores of each of the statements. And then cohesion on the y-axis, which tells you the level of agreement inside the team. Cohesion is not the same as standard deviation. It's a slightly more sophisticated way of measuring it. But the point here is pretty clear. If you have a high level of agreement and a high level of cohesion, that means that the teams are doing fairly well. And you also know at the same time, they seem to be on the same page. You want to amplify this. If you have teams that find themselves in that green zone, high cohesion and also high performance, you say, you know what, let's amplify this. Let's spread this with the rest of the organization. And you see some teams that are right here, Team Wham and Team Duran Duran in the green zone. Good stuff. Observe them, work with them, share their knowledge, maybe do some brown bag lunches, whatever it takes. Make sure that we can share what they're doing with the rest of the organization. There's nothing more powerful than that. But here is where it gets really interesting. This is the yellow zone, and we call that a line. Here we have high performance, low cohesion. What does that mean? It means that they're doing fairly well, at least that's what they perceive. But at the same point, they're not on the same page. They may disagree on the definition of done. They may not understand what continuous integration means. There might be a number of different challenges that they have. And this is a typical thing that happens when you have a leading indicator to poor performance. So here, as a coach, you need to align teams here. You need to help these teams and make sure that they can actually be more on the same page and understand where their challenges are. This is coaching gold. This is exactly where you can make a big difference. Now, sometimes you see teams here in improve. It's a yellow zone, but low performance, high cohesion. What does that mean? Well, what that means is that Well, they're not doing so great, but they know they're not doing so great. They are self-aware, and that means that you probably need to step back a little bit, maybe observe them, but let them do what they do themselves, because they probably know already how to improve. Now, if you get teams here, it's a different story. In the red zone, in mitigate, low performance, low cohesion. These are teams who just basically scream for help. They say, please help us out. We don't do really well, and we're not on the same page. Now, here's where you can do some good. As a coach, you can double click on any of these. These are dots that essentially represent teams. If you double click on any of them, when you do that, what will happen is that a separate report will open up, and that report will then be specific to that particular team. So remember the report we looked at earlier when we saw the entire division. Now we're just looking at one team, and you can see it's a slightly different picture. This doesn't look so great when you look at technical practices, for instance. The name of this team is Holy Rollers. This is where you can start to do some work. Now, what do we do? Well, here's where we can start to do our work. We can look at our insights, and we can start to look at key strengths. These are the elements where we're doing best, the statements with the highest scores, the statement with the largest positive difference to the benchmark, and the statements with the highest amount of agreement. But we probably want to focus on the opportunities. This tells us where we're not scoring so well. So this is where you might want to start having some of these conversations. What I recommend you do is look at the recommendations. We always bring those for most of our surveys. These are AI generated recommendations that have also been validated by data scientists and later curated by CA experts. So here, for instance, the question is, most code is written using TDD. What you will see here is the recommendations that talk about why this is important. Like, what are some of the things we can do to encourage test-driven development, for instance? Okay, provide TDD training. All right, that might be useful. Encourage pair programming. Not a bad idea. Monitor test coverage and quality metrics. You see some things you can do. And on top of that, you then see some follow-up discussions or some things you can do next as a coach and with your team. So they're not there to do anything other than to help you accelerate your craft as a coach. Gives you some hints and some tips on what you might want to do next, given the type of results you see here. So this is what this does. It shows us what's going on, when it's happening, and for whom. And how is this helping us build a culture of continuous improvement? Well, the way it works is because it becomes part of your culture. What you do is you collect the data just like we did. We created the team structure, we sent out the survey. Some of it we did with facilitator mode, but that didn't work so well here because we were in our staging environment and we had much more people go on it at the same time. But we will be in production next time. But the point is, when you set out the survey, you collect that data. The next part you do is to find the narrative. You look at the analysis. You look at the reports that I showed you. And those reports are there to help you see the narrative, the story. You saw the trend line, and you can see that we were doing quite well over time, but we were struggling with technical practices. But at the same point, you can start to see where we're making some improvements too. You tell the story not only to management, but also to your team. But then what you do is you use that to understand the context. This is where this first value of the Agile Manifesto is so important. Do you remember individuals and interactions over processes and tools? This is not about comparative agility or about the tool itself. It's about the data that you have to better understand the context. When you have this information, you can now engage with your teams and start to take action based on it. So, for instance, remember we had some problems with TDD, right? That's what we saw in that data. What you can do now is you can start to work with your team, maybe through a retrospective or maybe through a separate continuous improvement item. And you can use a number of different coaching techniques to do this. There's lots of resources on the Scrum Alliance site that you can look at. But one that I really love is kind of like a combined open space session. It has a little bit of liberating structures in it if you're comfortable with that. And what I typically would do is I will start with this, the what. I know the what because I just looked at that and I know that we're having problems with TDD. Now, the next thing I will do is I will say, so what? What is the impact of us not doing TDD? Well, this is a conversation we can have with our team. You will see a lot of things come up then. Things like, well, we're having some problems with technical debt. We're not getting to done very often. Our quality might have some challenges. I mean, we know TDD can have some significant benefits in the right context. So these are some of the impacts that will come up when you have that conversation. Now, what you do after this, though, after you've identified the impact of this impediment, is that you look at the now what. Okay, now we know that this is a problem. What are we going to do about it? What's the solution? What can we do to improve based on the data that we showed? Well, here's where we can do something good. Well, maybe it's about additional training. There is a really excellent CSD class with Scrum Alliance, for instance, Certified Scrum Developer. That could be something that can help you introduce things like TDD. Maybe we hire a technical coach. Maybe we improve our technical infrastructure, for instance, so we have a testing framework. There's lots of things you can do. The point being, have the data be part of that conversation and let the team, together with you in a facilitated manner, come up with ways to solve this, or at least try to solve it, because you don't know if you solved it unless you iterate on it, right? The other thing I highly encourage that you do is that you go one-on-one. And what I mean by that, try to have some private conversations with some of your team members, not all of them, but maybe say 15 to 20%, and ask 2 questions. Number 1, what surprised you about the data? You will learn some really interesting things if you ask that question. And the second question, ask, what is the data not telling us? And again, you will find some really interesting things that will help form your view of what's going on. The next thing you do, and this is really important, gather objective metrics. It's great to do comparative agility. Don't get me wrong. I love the tool, but it is subjective. And it is all about how the teams perceive their working. Now, that doesn't mean that isn't right. I mean, of course, that is their reality. But on top of that, gather some objective metrics. Look at defects in production over time. Look at flow efficiency metrics. Look at things like MTTR, mean time between build failures. These are all very objective metrics that you can have in addition. And then when you've done that, and it doesn't take that long, then you take action. What you do is you gather the data, you go to the person who can make a decision here, and that usually is maybe a VP or above, and you say, hey, Mr. or Mrs. VP, this is what I did. I used the world's largest agility assessment tool. I did this across my organization. I looked at the results, crunched the numbers, talked with my teams to see where the main challenges were, combined that with interviews, and then I looked at my objective metrics. And here are the 2 or 3 things I'd like to do next to address these challenges. Don't say 20 things. Don't say 30 things. Say 2, maybe 3 things. Okay, you get their attention. What are you looking for? Well, you're looking for financial support to do it. It could be additional certifications. It could be additional training. It could be infrastructure improvements. Yes, you will need some investment, some financial commitment. And the other is that you will need political support, because the changes you're going to make here are going to perhaps have some political impact, and you need that support if you work in a large organization. Now, if you do that, then you can start to make these changes, and then you go back to your team and you say, thank you for taking the time. Thank you for answering those surveys. I crunched the numbers, I worked with you, and here are the 2 things we're going to do next. And then be open and transparent about those changes, and then keep making those changes every 2 or 3 months. Go back, do the survey again, see if there's any changes, look at the metrics, if they're improving or decreasing in efficiency, and then keep iterating and keep making new changes to those challenges, because this is not about having the right answer. It's about continuously improving how you work. Agile is not something you become, it's something you become more of. And having this data is going to help you build a culture of data-driven continuous improvement, where the data is what steers you, not just gut feel. So in a nutshell, that's how this tool works. I apologize for this facilitator mode not working, being in our staging environment. We will do this session again later at 3 a.m. my time. So if you're into that, we can try it in production, and I think that'll work better. But this is in a nutshell how this tool works, and it's available to you right now, again, by going through the Scrum Alliance site. There is one more thing I wanted to show you, and we can't go into great detail about it, but I want you to be aware of it, and that is the personal improvement tool. that is right here. And that is the product owner PI is what I'm showing right now. This is a personal tool. It's just for product owners. It's just for Scrum Masters. And what it does, it gives you a chance in your role to understand the things, the norms, the type of behaviors that are important for you to be successful. And based on how you score, let me give you an example. Taking a survey now, and I'm looking at the product owner PI. By the way, that particular survey has been made by the product owner community in the Scrum Alliance. I think it's a wonderful survey. But I look at this, I maintain an up-to-date understanding of my organization's strategy. Kind of important, right? I'm going to answer that. I understand what constitutes value to the business. All right, you know what? These are kind of important questions. In this case, I'm going to say I'm not so sure I know that. I'll be honest. I understand what constitutes value to the end users. Okay, so we're going a little deeper here. Okay, I don't think I know that at all. But you see what's going on. These are really important questions, norms and behaviors that we know are important for you to be successful as a product owner is made by the Scrum Alliance community. And what happens when you answer that survey, and I'm going to just close this survey now to show you, you will then see not only how you score, so you can break it down by the different elements that you see in the product owner course that you take, you also get recommendations with resources of how to do better. Here's, for instance, a question that I didn't do so well in. I observe users with our product in the normal environment. Okay, I didn't do that so well. Well, here's how to conduct user observations. Okay, set of design thinking tools and metrics. Okay, these are good resources. I can look at these resources now and click on them. They're completely free. And then you can go in there and actually start to make changes to how you work. And if you like some of these, click on this little topic here to the left. And what's going to happen, I'm going to add it now to my personal improvement backlog. So all the things I want to do to be better in my job as a product owner, I will now track this in my little backlog. This is not something anyone else will see except for me. I will keep control over this. My manager won't see this. It's just for me. It's like a personal fitness app for the professional. And you can look at this and it will point you to resources that we have in the Scrum Alliance, for instance. You can also look at progress over time and see which of the elements you're doing well in. You can look at this and compare yourself to the world to see, like, how am I doing compared to everyone else? And you can start to see that too if you're interested. But the point being is, this is something just for you. And if you want to, you can share this with your coach. If you click on coach sharing, you can go in here and add your coach or advisor, and then you can share this. But if you don't do that, it will be only for you. So this is not one of those things that your managers are going to look at. It's just for you to improve in your work. And this is an exclusive offering just for people who are product owners and Scrum Masters. So I highly encourage you to look at that one too. And what I will do, if we do another session like this, and do please rate this, we will do a little deeper dive into this particular tool. But there's just so much material to cover for comparative agility, so I just wanted to cover that one in some detail. Okay, again, my apologies for running this in staging. I was obviously not ready for all of that traffic, but I think in the end, we got there anyway, and we were agile, right? Isn't that how this works? We just have to come up with other ways to meet our goal. And I think ultimately we were able to get through it anyway, and hopefully this could be useful for you. The whole goal of this was for you now to have the knowledge you need to activate your membership, go straight in there and use the tool yourself. Molly, I know there might be some questions, and I also know there's going to be lots of resources that you're going to give people now. So if they're looking for a class, or if they're looking for a quick start guide or a PDF or anything like that, I know that's going to be sent to them via email. So I think we have about 10 minutes left. So I'm more than happy to take some questions if there are any.
Yes, so really quick, just so people know, like Jorgen mentioned, we do have resources for you. So if you look on the tool, there should be a box on your screen that's highlighted right now that's related content. This is going to have links to give you access to Scrum Alliance's website, your member dashboard, Comparative Agility website, and then a lot of great resources from the Comparative Agility team about the tools, the platforms, how to use them. So make sure you check those out. You will still be able to access those resources after the event when the webinar becomes on demand. If you have any questions, please throw that in the question box and we'll get to those. And as Jorgen also mentioned, we do have a survey for you just to get a better understanding of your interaction with the tool and with the member benefit. So if you could take a quick minute to fill out that survey for us. So really quick, we're going to jump into some Q&A. So one of the big questions we were getting, or kind of repeated questions we were getting, was about where the World Index data is coming from and how that is determined.
Yeah, great question. And it is coming from the people who are registered users with Comparative Agility. We have been now in business since 2008. It was actually Mike Cohn and Kenny Rubin. I believe Mike Cohn is actually a co-founder of the Scrum Alliance. So I think that's kind of nice. It kind of is a full circle situation. The two of them, Mike and Kenny, they were the ones who came up with Comparative Agility. And then Almir Drugovic and myself built it from there. If you look at the kind of data that we have now, there is a lot of it. We have more than 15 million data points at this time. Over 40,000 organizations are using us. We are in over 100 different countries, not as many as you, I don't think, but we are in over 100 countries, and there's lots of people using it. So all the responses we have, we don't ask people to reveal a lot about themselves, but we do ask them to identify their industry. So that's how we are able to know which industry you belong to. And the World Index itself is an aggregated moving average of those particular responses. Now, they're validated because we know they're valid users. The free users aren't included in the index. But yeah, that's how it works. And it moves slightly over time, kind of like a Dow Jones in a way, but it's not changing from day to day. I mean, it's a huge data set. So you will see it change over time, but it's not like you're going to see great changes from day to day.
Awesome. So then another question we got was, people can measure their agile success with velocity, bird charts. What makes this assessment different?
Yeah, no, I think it's actually quite different. So, velocity, burn down challenge, those are all nice ways to sort of understand progress, I think. And it's a visual indicator of how the teams are doing. Are they producing value? Are they encountering impediments? All those kind of things, I think, are ways that you can have those visual indicators be useful. What these tools do, these assessments do, is to go a little bit deeper and a little bit broader. Here we're looking at things that go beyond just thinking, are, for instance, Scrum or daily Scrums useful? Here we're looking at things like culture. We're looking at psychological safety. We're looking at the level of leadership commitment you're having, or to what point do you understand the strategy that the company is trying to convey? These things are being measured now in a way that's very hard to measure otherwise, because if people aren't able to communicate what the strategy is, it's very hard to execute on something that's meaningful to the company. So this goes a lot deeper than just, hey, how's our story points going? This goes to the environment behind it. More importantly than anything else is that I think it kind of creates that culture where data becomes part of how we improve. Agile, one thing I love about Agile is that it doesn't really tell you what to do, but it tells you where the problems are. And I think that's what we try to do with these surveys too, since we trust them because they're made by people that we know about this particular domain, and we validate them with data scientists. When we see that the teams are struggling with a certain element that we know is important, what that does, it doesn't give us that answer, but it helps us now have a conversation with the team about it and say, okay, is TDD something we should try? And then we go from there and see if it helps the team or not. But it goes a lot deeper than just burn down charts and things. Not to say anything wrong about that. I think those things still are there, but I think this complements those particular metrics. It's a bigger kind of picture, if you will.
Okay, and then another question, a little more on the logistical side. So we have a few questions around, they're obviously members of Scrum Alliance and have access to the tool. Do their teammates need to be members of Scrum Alliance to access the surveys in order to be able to answer the surveys? What does that look like?
No, not at all, which is really great. So what happens is that you activate your membership, your subscription. It is free. You have 5 teams that you can use. What happens is you become an administrator, an account owner, if you will, and you can then create the teams just like we did in the structure, and send out those surveys to as many people as you like. That's actually kind of cool. Those people who take the surveys don't have to log in or sign into anything. They can be anonymous. In fact, that's one of the benefits of this. So they don't have to sign in at all. You can just add them to your team and send it out to the people that you want to send them out to in that particular team unit. And they don't have to be comparative agility users. So yeah, you can completely use this for yourself. Another thing that I think is kind of cool is you can share this with your fellow coaches. If you being a Scrum Alliance member, you get this benefit, and you have a person who may not be a Scrum Alliance member, you can add them to your account so they can share in your benefit until they actually get their own Scrum Master certification. But for the moment, you can also share this with your fellow coaches, which I think is really great too.
So thank you. We have a question. My team isn't keen on surveys. How can I make this survey more fun / attractive to them?
Yeah.
Like, are there elements of the tool that make it stand out from the ordinary, or ways to personalize it?
Yes, there is. In fact, there's a couple of ways to do that. So I'm not sure if I have time to show you now, but let me see if I can show you some of that. I might not be able to get into it. We have done a couple of things. So first of all, facilitator mode, which obviously didn't work so well in our staging environment. That's one way to make it more interesting. The other way that I think is to kind of make the survey itself look different. You can change some things around how it appears. Let's see if I can log in here and just kind of show you how you can look at this, for instance, because it could be one of those where you can say, all right, I have an idea of how this looks. I want to make it more fun. And maybe I want to do dark mode, for instance, or maybe I want to do list mode. Maybe I want to do some sort of interesting background. There are ways to do that too. So in our surveys here, branding is one thing. You can brand the survey to maybe use a different color, make it look interesting that way. That could be interesting. Oh, this is very loud. What you could also do is you could go in here and look at the survey and look at, for instance, skins. So if you want to do a seasonal skin, you could do a New Year's skin. This is a survey that has a New Year's skin. We'll see how this appears, but this is supposed to be kind of a fun, Happy New Year kind of skin. I mean, I'm not saying it's going to change their world, but it's showing them a little bit different ways of doing it. It just kind of gives you some additional pizzazz, if you will, to the surveys. We keep adding new skins also, so you can do like a Valentine's Day special. We have ones that are coming out now soon that has to do with, for instance, world cities and wonders of the world. So we do different things to try to make the survey more interesting. That all being said, the bigger thing here is people don't have no problem answering surveys if they're useful. So the important thing here is that when people take their time, whether that's 10 minutes or 15 minutes, our responsibility is to take action based on those results, based on that feedback. If we take action based on those results, if we are able to remove impediments so that their work becomes more effective and their lives become a little bit better, I can guarantee you that they will not be tired of doing those surveys. So that's the more important thing. Yes, we can make them look interesting and all that, but the most important thing is that people want to make sure they're not wasting their time. If we take action and you inform your coaching based on the feedback you get, I will guarantee you that they will take that survey next time and have no complaints.
All right, I think we have time for one more question. I used the survey of this tool a few days ago. My understanding is that this assessment never pushes or forces to be agile. It can also vouch for waterfall method as well. Is that correct?
Vouch for waterfall sounds terrible, but no, well, I will say this. The tool is agnostic in the sense that it covers anything related to continuous improvement. There are project management surveys we have, for instance. And if you're working in an environment where you have a lot of certainty, if you're repeating something that's already been done, so there's not a lot of variability in your process, there's nothing wrong with working in a project management sense in those environments. So yeah, we have project management surveys as well. All that we're trying to do is to bring to the surface where there might be challenges so that you as a coach or a change leader or a scrum master can listen to that feedback and engage with the team and improve where it makes sense. We're not trying to say that this is the only way to do work. We're just trying to say, here's some challenges that you may want to be aware of. Now it's up to you to have a great conversation with the team and take the next steps. That's at the end of the day what this is all about.
Amazing. So I think we will wrap it up here for the Q&A. We have a couple questions left, but I don't think we can answer them in the time we have left. So like I said, I'll pass these questions on to Jorgen, and he can answer them, and we will put them in an FAQ doc. For everybody asking, this presentation has been recorded, and later this week, you will receive an email with a link to access the on-demand recording. You will still have access to all of the resources linked. You'll still be able to ask questions, so make sure if you come up with different questions while you're watching it again that you submit those, and we'll try and get those answered for you. And if you, and as you all are, you Scrum Alliance members, in the email that goes out with the recording and the access recording, we will also include your link to claim your SEU, your Scrum Education Unit, for attending this webinar. A huge thank you to Jorgen for taking the time to demo this amazing tool and show us the power of it. An incredible thank you to everybody who showed up for this webinar. We are so grateful to have you as members of our community, and we thank you for supporting webinars like these. We will hopefully have some more of these coming this year. Keep an eye on your inbox. And like I said, we'll send a recording out later this week. So thank you so much, everyone, for attending, and we will see you later.